Our next speaker, Art Agnos, has lived in San Francisco, where he began work as a civil rights social worker in city public housing and gradually became politically active as California State Assemblyman, mayor of San Francisco, and a presidential appointee of President Clinton. One of his signature accomplishments is the demolition of the Embarcadero Freeway in 1990 and reconnecting San Francisco with its historic waterfront. Some unique highlights include surviving being shot twice while volunteering in a public housing project, what became known as the Zebra Killings, hosting Soviet Union President Mikhail Gorbachev during his first visit to the U.S., and befriending Mother Teresa, who came to his house one Sunday evening to tell the mayor what she needed for homeless facilities. I first met Art in Shanghai in 1989 with Mayor Zhu Rongji on the eve of Tiananmen. It's been a long time, Art. Welcome, and thank you for being here.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's an honor for me to join this most distinguished group of speakers who have begun to tell you some of the enormous worldwide things that Chuck did. My story with Chuck Feeney, a true San Franciscan, who was honored by our city on October 17th when the Board of Supervisors, President Aaron Peskin was joined by Mayor London Breed to adjourn our city's work in his honor. My story is different than those of my colleagues here, wherein Chuck used his philosophy with them to build facilities and build programs for medical, educational, humanitarian, and diplomatic purposes that made such a difference in our world. And now, as you can imagine, as mayor of San Francisco, I too had the opportunity to meet some extraordinary people who made a difference in our world. But Chuck Feeney was the most extraordinary of them all. And this, briefly, is the story of how the Feeney Way prevented a monumental disaster on the San Francisco waterfront. In 2013, the Golden State Warriors proposed to build an 18,000-person arena over the water at Piers 3032, halfway between the Ferry Building and the Giants ballpark. It was strongly supported by the governor, the mayor, the legislature, Chamber of Commerce, the Labor Council, the media. You get the idea. An awesome collection of power. And opposing the proposed arena at that location was a very small band of concerned San Franciscans who feared the impact of such a colossal facility on an environmentally fragile spot. And as the mayor who, as you heard, tore down the Embarcadero Freeway, I was invited to join them. Mike Karasik, Andrew Brooks, Rudy Nothenberg, Gail Cahill, and Rick Dickerson. In the beginning, we looked at each other and wondered how to generate the resources to challenge the most powerful political and financial coalition this city had ever seen for a project of this nature. It was suggested that we go meet with the billionaire who was giving away all his money to do good for the communities all over the world. It was Chuck Feeney. And the description, something we are so familiar with today, humble, anonymous, resides in a rented two-bedroom apartment, rides public transit, flies economy, and prefers Delancey Street over the shishi restaurants we have all over San Francisco. That was unheard of to me. And at a luncheon meeting at Delancey Street, I met Chuck Feeney, whose favorite wardrobe when we were working was this. Blue collar shirt, navy cardigan sweater, khaki pants, Timex watch, and a briefcase that he carried his briefing papers with. It took me a while to absorb it all and believe it. But over time, I came to realize how much he truly loved San Francisco, and indeed, of all the places that he could have chosen to live, he chose San Francisco. And while he liked the idea of the Warriors Project we were talking about, he agreed that with our coalition argument that it was a bad idea to put an 18,000-person arena over the water along the Embarcadero in an earthquake-prone city. So he agreed to underwrite our modest campaign with the only condition being the same one everybody else had to deal with, which is anonymity. And the rest is history. It took almost 2 years, but our little coalition developed a message that persuaded the Warriors to look for another spot. And that turned out to be the Warriors Chase Arena today, a magnificent site on solid land adjacent to the bay, but not over it. And we all got behind that new location, and everybody quickly agreed that the Warriors' second choice turned out to be their best choice. Take a look when you leave. It's right on the other side of this building, right across on 3rd Street. And the ultimate compliment to our little coalition came from the Warriors' president at that time, Rick Welts, who said, "Art, thank God your coalition stopped our first site." In the middle of that campaign, Chuck had an horrific stroke, one that left him unable to converse and confined to a wheelchair. But he stayed active. He never gave up, and he always knew what we were doing. And during this time, he and I developed a kind of playful competition because we both went to Delancey Street a lot. We developed a playful competition for our favorite table, the one up by the front where the host stands, right behind his place. And the first to arrive would claim it and then wink at the other one when he came in. And that playful game would continue until the stroke kind of changed the dimensions a little bit. After that, the favorite table went to the first arrival, but because of Chuck's disability and wheelchair, when he arrived with Helga or with guests, I would get up and offer to move. And my luncheon guests would look at me and ask, why would the former mayor, in 30 years using this table, give it up for that man in the wheelchair? And then they would hear the story that you're hearing today. Chuck's stroke and loss of speech limited our conversations, mostly me telling him mayoral stories. And during one of the last times we had lunch, he seemed frail and a little vulnerable. And when Dave left the table to go get Helga or see to some business, and aware of Chuck's Catholic upbringing, I told him about the only holy experience I ever had in my political career. It was the story of the time in 1989 in December when Mother Teresa, now a saint, of course, came to my house late on a Sunday night, unannounced, to ask me for what she thought was a city-owned building down in the Fillmore. Chuck's blue eyes kind of lit up when I started, and he kind of leaned in his wheelchair. And the story begins when Sherry and I, my wife, were coming home from a dinner on a Sunday night with my mother. She used to give us a wonderful Greek dinner. And she remembered as we were approaching the house that we didn't have milk for the kids in the morning breakfast. Our kids were 9 and 5. So I said, will you take the kids upstairs? I'll go get the milk. And so I did, and on the way back, the phone in the car rang, and it was Sherry in a very animated tone of voice saying, Art, Mother Teresa's walking up the stairs to the house. Mother Teresa's walking up the stairs. It was about 9:30 at night, Sunday night, cold and all the rest. She said, what do I do? Well, open the door, I'll be right there, and we'll see what she wants. Sure enough, I walked into my living room. Imagine this. Walked into my living room, and there on our living room couch was Mother Teresa with two nuns next to her, wearing her white habit with the blue stripes. Hello, Mother. What brings you here? And she had a very good command of English, spoke softly, and said, I have come to talk to you about the work of God. And so I listened. And she described the building down in the Fillmore on the corner of Turk and Fillmore, it's still there, that she wanted for a place for the homeless. And so I said to her, Mother, I think I know that building, and tomorrow morning, when I go to the office, the mayor's office, I will get right on it. She says, the work of God cannot wait until tomorrow morning. Well, Mother, it's now 10 o'clock at night. What do you have in mind? She said, we must go now. We must go now? Yes. I said, you know, it's a little dark, it's cold, it's December, neighborhood can be a little sketchy at night. She said, do not fear. God will protect us. Just to make sure God protected us, I called for a couple of my bodyguards, and they were there in a flash. And off we went. And we came to this building, and we were walking around trying to figure it out, and we couldn't see anything from the front, so we went around the back, and there were about 8 or 9 black and white guys, homeless, trying to stay warm. They saw me coming, and they said, it's the mayor. What are you doing here, Mr. Mayor? It's now about 10:30, 11 o'clock. And I said, well, I brought somebody here famous to see you. They look up. It's Mother Teresa. What are you doing here? So she blessed each one, and we said, we're trying to figure out who owns this building. Well, the city owns the building, but we've been living here for the last 5 years. Well, there you go, Mother. Tomorrow morning, I will get on it. And she smiles, and we started heading back to the cars. And we got there. I said, Mother, can I ask you a question? She says, yes. What is it? I said, do you do this often? She said, what do you mean? She said, well, do you go to mayors' houses late at night on a Sunday night and ask for buildings like this? She says, oh, yes, I do it all the time. And I said, well, who was the last mayor you did it to? She said, it was Mayor Koch in New York. And you know, he has a much nicer house than you do. So you like to tease a little, huh? I said, well, you know, Mother, I don't do these things for free, you know. She says, what do you mean? I said, I'm going to do you a favor. I'm a politician. You got to do me a favor. She didn't hesitate. She said, yes, what is it? And I described the First Lady project that my wife Sherry was working on. At that time, it wasn't fentanyl that was the epidemic. It was crack cocaine. And she was raising money to build a facility that would house addicted pregnant women so that they could give birth to a healthy baby by getting off of the drugs. And so I said, the next time you come to San Francisco, we'd like to show it to you. And she said, well, let's go now. Let's go now. It was 11 o'clock at night. I called the San Francisco General Hospital. It's the mayor. I'm coming with Mother Teresa. There was bedlam. Because, you know, the big shots don't work on Sunday night at 11 o'clock. It's the low-income workers, many of whom were Latino and Catholic. So we got there, and we went up, and she went to the neonatal unit, where she put her hand in each incubator and blessed 11 babies who were a day old going through withdrawal. And then we went down to the AIDS ward, and she blessed every one of those guys that were dying with AIDS and left her little medallion, as she did with everybody that she met, in order to give them that blessing. And then we were leaving. And when we got to the front of the hospital, the old hospital, they had a room about this size for the entry, and we turned around and there were about 100 people following her. And she turned around to them and she said to this, and I've memorized it for over 30 years. When you all die and go to heaven, God's going to be waiting for you, and he's going to thank you for what you're doing for these sick babies and these sick men. Because in taking care of them, you are taking care of his son, Jesus Christ. Well, when I finished that story, Chuck's eyes were shining, and he tapped his heart and pointed up. Now, I'll leave it to you, who may know him better than I, to interpret that. But I interpret it as maybe I will get there someday. And I think today we all agree he's there. Now, I'm going to do something a little unusual, and I'm going to ask you to stand if you can and sit if you can't, and join me in a unity clap to celebrate the life of Charles Chuck Feeney. It's very easy. Start slow and end fast. Thank you very much.